Welcome to Your Game is Garbage. Good morning, George.
Good morning.
And good morning, Giele, our
Hi.
new guest. Because since I have discovered the virtue of having a guest on our show, I have been procrastinating a little bit too much on my own designs. So here is our second guest. And as maybe some listeners have already noticed, he is our muse of my brother and I, when concerning stealing ideas.
Hi, Jerome. I'm glad to be part of your procrastination. So
Yes.
thanks for having me.
And maybe we can steal some more of your ideas. Who knows?
Do I need to talk?
Yeah, I almost heard podcastination. We should just steal that and be like, that's what we should call it from now on. It's a podcastination.
Podcastination. Yeah, nice.
But welcome. I'm so excited to have you here too. And
Thank you.
Yeah. And maybe you have an idea or two for me too.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, because if I can remember correctly, you are the biggest procrastinator of our three, I think.
Oh, yes. Yes, I am.
Is that so?
It is. Well, especially when it comes to game design. There's always something else I'm doing
Right.
instead of, and I'm using it as an excuse.
But so, George, I have invited Giele because he's working on a Civilization game. And there's a lot to say about Civilization games, of course, about the topic, of course, and how and why what my interest is why we like Civilization games so much. And Giele is designing one because he likes it. Am I right?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
why did you start designing a Civilization game, Giele?
So, like you say, I just like playing them very much. Like it's such an epic experience to start with, like really nothing, and end the game like you've built your complete civilization. You completely customized it, like as you want it to be.
Yes, but you could argue that city building games are also like that. I think the Civilization game comes
sure.
with conquests, and it has the military side of it.
Yeah.
Well,
added.
generally it does indeed. It's often mixed with like the 4X genre, like, but it's not really always the case. Like in Tapestry, latest Stegmaier game, it's not really a 4X, but it's still a civilization game in a way. But I think it's the macroscopic nature of it that really appeals to me. Like you're going through history, you're starting with really nothing of technologies, of population, and you're ending with like an enormous civilization. You really feel like you have progressed and did something.
Yeah. I like to call them interactive time lapses of history. Like it's just within a few hours or however long you're playing, you just get to see from beginning to end this like really cool experience. And there's a sense of accomplishment.
Yeah. Yes, I agree, and I think it's for me when I was thinking about it, I think it's only problematic if you place that civilization building in history, and that's where I think it starts becoming problematic and racist and culturally inappropriate. And that's why most Civilization games that come out now are set in space, and you're exploiting either a barren planet or aliens that you have no rapport with. So
yeah, that's right.
I think that's the easy cop out, but yeah, it's for me that's fine. But to continue on your design, tell me about the mechanics in your game and how you've chosen to implement the Civilization theme and genre.
Sure. Well, I didn't really implement the theme. It was like I want to make Civilization game, and I'm really just gonna focus on one particular game that I really like, which is Sid Meier's Civilization 5, the fifth one, the computer game, and I wanted to make that in a board game, which has been done, of course. It's somewhere behind me, but it's really
we've played it a lot, and we
played it a lot, and you notice those are long games. Like we play for 6, 8, sometimes even 10 hours, and while I really like those games, it's hard to find friends that want to play such games because like explaining the game already takes an hour, except Jerome.
Yeah.
Well, in our friend group, we like those games, right?
Yeah.
There are other games we like Eclipse that we play as well, but they're not really accessible for people that don't often play games. Like, so I wanted to make a Civilization game that is accessible and plays in like around 2 hours.
Yeah, but that was the premise of Jamie Stegmaier as well for Tapestry.
True. And not only of Tapestry, but like the latest Civilization game that came out, Dominations, the one that you also sent me, also had that premise of wanting to be a Civilization game that plays in under 2 hours. But I'm unsure whether or not they succeeded in that. I read some reviews and I noticed like it still takes 3 even more hours. So.
And when you started telling you about your design and what you were, when you did the first pitch to me and my brother, that's when I started to make the Civilization game also.
Yeah, it's true.
I was like, oh yeah, that's like a challenge. I love that.
I like the idea of a challenge of trying to take something that usually typically lasts so long and in theory should last so long. So I do agree with you about trying to create something that would last a lot less. Because, I mean, you also don't have a lot of friends that would be willing or have the time to play. But also I keep losing friends when I introduce them to long games. They're like, we're busy. We can't come over this time. It's just if you keep playing long games, we just can't do it.
But there are games, and I argued that with the new game I'm making, there are games that feel like 3 hours and are only 1 hour to play, and there's games that feel like only 1 hour and you've been playing the whole afternoon, for example.
Can I interject?
That's the mark of a good game, but
Can I interject with a question to see your opinion on this? What about long games that allow you to save easily your progress? Would that work for a Civilization style game?
Yeah, I think so. I actually think that would be great. I'm still waiting for the first Legacy Civilization style game. Like that. Right. That would be awesome. That's a good idea. But
I think Seafall comes in. It's a little bit
well.
It's not Civilization game, but it's more in that genre. But to answer your question, George, when I play a Civilization game on the computer, I always start over. Yeah,
and it's actually an interesting point because I for me as well, I always start the game over because it's actually the early game that's the most interesting.
The early game is the most interesting.
You're exploring, you're finding these ruins or huts or something. You feel like those early moments in the game really impact your end game, and that's not really the case like at the end. Like you got something that's called the accumulation principle. Like every tiny micromanagement you do in your cities or colonies or whatever just affects your endgame so much because each turn you get income from that one tiny action you did.
Yeah. So I think you guys just touched on why these games are so appealing and have replayable value. Is because it is that that combination of different elements at the beginning that make you want to play over and over to see what happens next time. And so I guess to my own question, I feel like people might get too bored if they just come back for another day, another session to continue a game where ultimately all they would really want to do is just try again and try something different. So
it's not necessarily different, but I think the early game is always the most interesting, and I'm not sure I agree with you why, but how do you implement that in a board game? Because if the 2/3 at the end aren't as interesting, that becomes a problem and the game overstays its welcome. But
for sure.
Is it because you don't have a goal? Because your first goal is to make a survivable economy. So you put some farms, the classic things, just to survive the first hurdle. And after that, you begin to do more complex economies with. But I feel like once that is done, once that industry chain works, and you start to focus on building statues or trying to level up these kind of houses or maybe go with your army over there, then the game starts to fall apart for me, because you're like, I've done a little bit of everything and I save the game, and next I'll start right over.
Yeah,
the next day.
Or something.
Yeah. Well, regardless of whether Tapestry can be considered a Civilization game,
I think you're the only one that played it. Or
I was just the only thing I was gonna comment on what we were just talking about is what makes it exciting for me to replay that game is like all of the mechanics and everything you just described stays the same except for all your initial character, like the types of culture that you are, and everybody has different abilities and everybody has different goals, and that is what keeps it exciting, because it doesn't also just affect like the mechanic of going through, because if there's like science, there's different paths you can take based on who you are. It also affects how you end up playing the game, and I think that's always exciting to me. It's like, I want to try somebody else next time, and there's some really clever mechanics within the character creation too, or the which culture you represent.
And actually, that's very interesting because, like within a few months, there's a new computer game, Civilization style game coming out that has you play several civilizations throughout the game, just to keep it new, and just like. Jerome talked about the discrimination, racism part in it, just to get rid of that aspect of the game. Like, you're not
because
playing really
the cultures become
culture.
Kind of a mishmash.
You're playing as humankind, actually, and I believe that's
cool.
the name of the game as well.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
I'll
called
look into that.
It looks
Humankind.
very good. Yeah.
It looks very promising.
I think, So, Giele, tell me about your mechanism, because you want to make the civilization has 4 aspects, I think: culture, science, military, and well-being. I'm not sure, but how do you approach that in your game?
So indeed, the economic part of it is actually the core of the game, and I try to focus on a couple of board games I knew that have like really nice resource management systems and engines, and think of Terraforming Mars and Eclipse, where you manage your income according to a track, right? You place cubes on a track, which tells you how much production you get each income turn, right?
Yeah.
Both Terraforming Mars and Eclipse do that.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they do. Yeah.
And it's actually more like Eclipse, where you also do you know Eclipse, George? So
I've played it. It's been a long time though, but yes, I have played it.
Eclipse is really a nice example because you place like your influence discs on a system, and in that system there are several planets, and those planets they yield resources, so they can actually use science, money, and production, I think.
Yeah.
And it's actually a nice thing that you just take those cubes from your playboard and you place them on the map. And doing that increases the resource cubes are colored in the resource type they are. So you place a money cube on a money planet, and by doing that you empty out your income track.
Yeah, you reveal
numbers,
a number, and it's incremental as well. The farther you go, the more one cube is worth, I think.
Right.
Like that.
And that's actually...
I like that system too, but the money track always gets me.
Yeah, the money track is really... I just talked about it with Maxime yesterday. Like, there is still an aspect of the money track we're still missing in the game. Like, you can go... you can do something... it's called a trick with bankruptcy.
Yeah, it's illegal.
Is it illegal?
Yeah, you can't do it. Yeah. If you would do an action that would bankrupt you, you can't do it. You cannot put the disc out if it would bankrupt you, and you cannot gamble on finding a planet with money. Yeah.
Right. So in my game, you got like those 4 resources. You got culture, like you said, science, food, and production. Those are actually the 4 basic resources that are in Civ 5 as well. So I just
and you wanted to make 4 mini games.
Yeah,
in the bigger game.
Right. Yeah. You got 4 tracks for each resource you have an income track that you wanted to place on the map. Just like in a civilization, you can, for example, have a tile where you place your cubes on with 2 production and 1 food, just like that. Right? But the main aspect of the game is like managing your tiles so that they yield interesting resources for you. Like you start with a plain style that can yield either 1 food or 1 production, but as you research new technologies, you can increase your yields. Maybe it becomes 3 food and 1 production, maybe it's 2 signs and 1 food, according to what your decisions in the previous turns were. Like which technologies you would research.
But I know the first game that you pitched to me was like a polyomino style with hexes. Like you could have an army of 1 hex, but better armies were like a little snake kind of guy, and you would place them out on the board.
Yeah, like it was really kind of abstracted, but I still like the idea.
That sounds like a cool idea.
Yeah.
Well, that was the idea that gave me my idea for my civilization game, so I ran away with it.
It was actually,
so have you published any games? Is this your first official big design?
This is my first design. Yeah, I'm not calling it big yet because it's still a work in progress, and as of now, I've had like multiple dozens of games that I've been trying to make, but I have never finished something.
Yeah, we'll talk about another game of his that he's making or is wanting to make. But something I want to interject as well. Giele, something I love that you do is that you're a teacher, and you have used a board game to teach chemistry to your students. Can you tell George about that?
Yeah,
that sounds... because I really like it. But can you tell me what you did? And what game you adapted? Yeah.
I have to think back. But I believe it was the game just won, I think. Or
yes.
No,
was it?
It's the other one.
No, it's the other one.
It's Pictomania.
Yeah, it's Pictomania.
Okay.
Like.
I'll help you, Giele.
Thank you. It's been a while, and I've tried several of my games that I have in the chest. In my
you have several games where you smash chemistry in.
I tried making a chemistry buggle too. So like with the dice,
that's cool.
You roll your own molecule.
That's cool.
So with Pictomania, I have my students draw an organic molecule. So I don't know, but what do you know? But in organic chemistry, like you have those long molecules that consist of several types of atoms, which you have to give a systematic name. So, for example, you got methane, which is the formula for that molecule is CH4. Well, my students have to learn how to draw a molecule from that name, or how to name a molecule from the structure, right?
That's cool.
So that's a thing they have to learn
recognize the structure and find the name.
Yeah, and I used the system of Pictomania to have them. They draw a number and a letter, and they look with that number and the letter on the.
There's a list with things that you can draw. I think 9 or 7.
Seven names are there.
Yeah.
And normally in Pictomania, it's like E1 card is a category, like several types of
the
cards.
first category can be apple, cherry, and grape, and it becomes more difficult and more abstract and more difficult to draw in the 4th round, I think. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But so you make a list of
several organic molecules. Yeah.
Organic molecules, and then they have to draw them as fast as they can and guess them from each other.
Yeah. So they're actually exercising both naming them and drawing them at the same time. And I don't have to do anything. They just I let them play and they correct each other. So that's really fun.
But even with chemistry as a subject, it sounds like fun.
Yeah, and my students also say it's really fun to do.
there's, I don't know about Europe because I have obviously not looked into, I grew up in Greece. I haven't looked into this at all. But in Canada, there's a video I did for a school here that actually uses arts immersion, is what they call it. And they teach kids through the arts. And that includes like learning math through dance or learning, other subjects through painting or, stuff like that. Something like this is amazing. Like that would fit perfectly in that kind of curriculum. But even like if you don't have an art school necessarily or a school that immerses kids in art immersion or whatever, this would be just great to like gamifying some of these subject matters. Because I was terrible at chemistry, but now I kind of want to learn. But like this would be great for me too because I don't remember anything.
Educational games have also the reputation that they're super boring and not fun.
But the education is more important than the fun often.
Yeah, but I mean, this is a teacher's perspective, right? Is what you're saying? Because I mean, if you were in class and you brought up the fact like, hey, today we'll play a game, what kid would not get excited about that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I've heard on the Ludology podcast, they were talking about educational games. And they did a research with the same box or the same game. They said, do you want to play this adventure game? And then they asked other people, do you want to play this educational game? And then the educational question, I think 2 out of 10 said, okay. And with the same box and the same artwork, was 7 out of 10 that wanted to play the adventure game.
You just have to give it an Indiana Jones theme and you're set.
Yeah, not put a sticker in educational game on there.
No, just hide the fact. Dora the Explorer.
The thing is, those educational games are also often made by educators, not by game designers. So those are people that have know about education, but often don't know how to implement fun in their games.
Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with, I forget which group it's from, like maybe board game reviewers and media group. Anyway, someone put together a virtual tavern for people in the industry to get together virtually because of COVID and stuff, because there's no events, which is pretty cool. So last Friday, I met a really interesting guy. He happens to be from Canada as well, and he uses games, and he has a channel, Brains on Games it's called, and he uses board games to teach kids with learning disabilities as well, and helps them like learn through some of the games that he discovers mechanics that could help with that. I thought it was really fascinating, but it's really cool what you did. You should maybe that is your first game.
Talking about stealing ideas, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
We all steal from each other.
It's so true. Well, that's really exciting. Yeah. How far in the prototype are you, or in the idea are you with this civilization game of yours?
My next step is actually prototyping. So currently, I do have enough ideas and systems that I might get something to work. But yeah, that's the next big step. So I should just try and test it. I've been thinking about it for so long. I've been trying to get things right. And each time I thought I'm ready for the prototype, I thought, but that is not quite right. I should just change that and then prototype. And that kept going. So now I still have things that I should change. But I think with what I got now, I should just get started.
But we've already played before the Corona crisis. We've played and we tested some of your ideas, but I think more loose stuff that was part of a bigger picture. But
because
interesting.
It's really interesting. But because each time I prototype, I start noticing things that are just not right. Right? I start cutting tiles and then I just go, oh shit. Wait, I can't, these tiles don't fit together. This just doesn't work. So even prototyping is helping
it's a learning process.
Getting me feedback,
Yeah, that's awesome.
I also had for Fujikoro a prototype with tiles I cut, and I played it off for myself once, and it was like, oh my god, all this work, and it doesn't work.
Yes.
You are working on your tiles now for your civilization game. I love hex tiles and my brother hates me for it because I always go back to hex tiles and flower tiles because I use those for Fujikoro. But I've been through, I think, and you can see it on my Instagram, like 9 types of tiles before I went for the one I was now. And when I see you send me pictures of your tiles, I'm like, oh yeah, I recognize this. I've been there too.
Yeah, what you say now.
Looking for a solution for a problem that's not there.
Right. Yeah. I've also tried.
So how's that going? How's that going?
So I've also tried like dozens of tessellations. I've tried like other shapes, other configurations of several hexes. Right now, I'm at a design that has 1 central hex and 6 half hexes around it. So when you place them together, you still create a hex grid, and it creates. It should create an interesting puzzle, but the puzzle is not right. It's not working still. So I might just start off with just a hex grid, maybe no tiles, and just try it like that. But yeah,
because you posted a question about it on Facebook, and some of the answers told you like, is the placement of the tiles, is that a big part of your game, or if you make that question too complex, will it distract from the rest of the game, or will it prolong the game? How do you feel? Where do you want your game to be? The exploration part, I presume. What place do you want to give it in your game?
It's actually pretty core. Like in your turn, you get a choice between 8 actions. You choose one of 8 actions, and they are all tied to the resource type, like the food, production, science, and culture. Each resource type has its 2 actions: a civil action and a military action. And for example, the civil science action is research a technology that's available, and it's a small mini game. It's stacking tiles and such. And I want each action to be its own mini game, right? The military science action would be exploration, so that would be the placement of the tiles. And I don't want you to walk over there and turn the tile over. I really want to add some sort of simple puzzle in it.
That's a challenge.
Yeah, that should be a small challenge. Yeah.
Because there's we talked about Archipelago, the game, where exploring is also it's not a puzzle. It's you push your luck.
Yeah.
Actually, you can see the top of the tile. So if you have somewhere you can fit it, it's easy. You can take it and place it. But you can also go for the other side of the tile and gamble if that one would match. And if it doesn't match, then you've just wasted your turn.
Yeah.
So
and that's
a bit.
Really not.
I don't know
fun.
if you played it, George.
I don't think so.
No, it's like it has a nice thing where the stack of tiles is in a plastic thing where you can't see the next tile. So
cool.
you can also choose to discard the top tile, and then you have to take the next one, and then you have to make sure it matches. And it's a very stressful kind of mini game, but it's also very frustrating.
Yeah,
and you don't like it, Giele.
Yeah, I find it quite harsh that you can take an action and just
skip your turn is always harsh, and it's not done.
That's it. Right.
So I have a question for you, maybe both of you. You know, obviously you love this genre of games. You probably have some favorites. You mentioned maybe a couple already at the beginning. So when you start designing a game that you say to yourself, I want to make a Civilization style game, obviously there are certain things that people will recognize that, hey, this is a Civilization game because it has this and this and this. And you obviously want to try to improve upon some of those mechanics, come up with some new mechanics. What are some of your priorities when you're coming up with a new idea in the same genre of games as other games that have been popular? And then we started this whole conversation about there isn't many games of this genre that are short. How important in your decisions is that aspect and versus trying to improve upon other games that already exist and come up with something different? Or do you just want to recreate that same experience yet shorter? Like I'm curious how you approach that. Because you have a passion for this genre.
I'd say I want the experience to be quite the same. Yeah, but I want to do it in another way. So it should still be very economy driven, because that's really the thing about civilization. For me, that's the core of civilization games.
There's one thing you can't change.
Yeah, you want to outpace your opponents with your economic engine. The military is just a tool to manipulate that. You can.
It's like in the real world.
Yeah, sure. It is actually.
Well, yeah,
it's a simulation
wars are
game.
won economically, and
Yeah,
the
sure.
military is the
So I wanted to implement some things that just would make playing it easier. Like, I don't want to have any hidden information. There is no card draw. There's no tiles that you should reveal at a certain moment. Everything should be open information. Everything should be on the table. Even the tiles that you can place should be open. You should be able to see, that's what I can explore. I should go there and then take the tile and place it there. All information should be open. So there's no hidden cards that have you play a card like, I play this card now. And
not take that.
Yeah, take that. All players are, you have what card? I just don't want that.
So that's one of the restrictions that you set yourself before you started designing.
Yeah, that's true. I set myself several restrictions, which is, one is no hidden information. The second one is that it should be fast and easy to teach. It should be play quite quick. So I want to have it more like a flow. A lot of
you're avoiding upkeep phases and different phases in the game. Yeah,
you're actually making quite small decisions. You're just doing one action per turn, which is a mini game, and then is the next player. It should be like.
And are you afraid that the decision will be pertinent enough, or will be important enough, or because sometimes there's some games where you say like, oh, I want to do that, and I have to do these 3 things, and I have to do one per turn.
Yeah.
So you know what you're gonna do, and you have to wait because you know what you're gonna do. You're just pressing a button 3 times.
It's one of my concerns. I'm really afraid of that. That's something I should test. Like,
and what do you think would solve these things? Do you know examples of other games that solve this problem?
I also feel that's a problem with some games too, by the way. Like, it's one of the things that turns me off some games. And as you were thinking about that answer, I just want to say I feel like I'll learn something, because I always make lists of things I want my games to have, and that list keeps growing as I think of new things. But what I loved about what you guys just talked about is a list of restrictions, things you don't want to fall into. Why is that so sort of brilliant to me? Maybe like I never thought of that, but that's a really great way to do that at the beginning. And
it's good to focus your design.
It's tool to focus. Yeah, I started doing that a half year ago, and it's really working well for me.
Yeah, because
for my
civilization game, I set restrictions as well, and one of them, Giele, is no tracks, no tracks, and no player boards, and everything should happen in the middle of the game boards. And one of the things that I really, it's not a restriction, but I want in the game is that every turn and everyone's turn is important for everyone all the time, so that you're not staring at your phone during the other games. But
that is one
if
of the
everyone is doing something important every time, then that's the mark of a good game for me.
Yeah, and that's one of the solutions you can implement to what was the question before? How could you?
He was asking about if there's any other games that you found that have solved that problem of not waiting too many turns to take.
Spending too many turns to do one thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's something else actually, but I found it quite interesting.
Sorry.
The part of me was thinking about if the turns go fast, you're still involved in the process, because like in 1 minute, maybe less, it's like my turn again. But another thing is really making other players' turns really interesting to you, because they can impact you in some sort of way. While when you're building an engine, it's not always the case, right? It's like a personal puzzle. It's often a personal puzzle, and you
A
need
lot
some.
of Euro games have that.
You need some sort of interaction to.
We can talk about Eclipse again.
Yeah.
Eclipse, when you do your turn, if you're exploring, if you're building or whatever you're doing, all the other players are like, oh, what are you doing? What signs are you taking? What tile are you gonna flip? What did you get?
Yeah.
Everything is important.
Yeah, and that's something I want to recreate.
Yeah. But another aspect of civilization games that I like, and it's also in Eclipse, is that you start far away from each other and there's no interaction in the beginning, and the interaction ramps up and culminates at the end in a perfect game. So is that something you want to do as well, or do you want players to be on top of each other from turn 2?
No, I actually want they start apart, they land on the continent, start exploring it, but they each land in a different corner of the continent, and at some point in the game they will meet each other. And then there is a lot of I planned a lot of interaction then, but you start by building up your engine to make it run when you meet your opponents, let's say. Yeah.
And that's also what we talked about earlier, maybe key to liking the next part, the halfway point of the game, like to still be interested in playing more, even though you really like the beginning part. This now it's like a whole new game in a way, because you're interacting with other players in a different way.
Yeah, because if you're building up to something that's never going to happen, so if you would take the military part out of it, you're building up for victory points, and that's
right.
I don't know if that works in the same way, but
Yeah.
The building up part is important.
Yeah, and it's really actually the core of the game as well. Because in my game, each turn you get an income of resources. And each turn you do an action with those resources. So you spend resources. One resource type actually. You spend food, or you spend production, or you spend science or culture. And you do an action with that. But the amount of resource you spend determines how powerful your action is.
Yeah.
So you actually want to increase your engine to get better actions to do. If you get more food as a food military action, you can move a military unit, maybe more units than your opponent, because your food production is better.
Yeah, I feel in those kind of games that the interaction is usually, oh, Giele, you moved your military that way. Now you're forcing me to do something to counteract that, while I wanted to do something cultural, but you're forcing my hand.
Yeah,
that doesn't always feel good to me. to be forced to do
something.
But,
well, it's a risk you're taking.
It's part of the game. Yeah.
For me, it's part of the game as well, because it's military is actually a supporting strategy often. You don't really need military to win, but you often.
If nobody does military, you can go peacefully on everything. But if someone starts to build armies,
you don't want to be left behind. And
there is always someone.
There's always.
And I
someone.
think the Civilization board game, Sid Meier's board game, does that very well.
Yeah, it's true. I find it really interesting because it allows for so many strategies to be relevant, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, I like it, and that's why I'm surprised that you like it as well, that you're trying to make it better. I think that's the most challenging part of what you're doing.
Yeah.
And I know you like to do it, and you like to think about it, but I feel like it's very difficult. I don't want to discourage you, but
well, it's very difficult, but I'm not the only one doing it. I actually find quite a lot of resources, like Jamie Stegmeier's design diary of Tapestry. It was really helpful, because I started making this game at the time that he started making Tapestry, or came out making Tapestry. Yeah. And it was really interesting to follow his design, because he had the same premise. He really wanted to make a short civ game. And I found quite a lot of other resources which really have helped me. And actually, additionally, I like Civilization 5 is still like the grail for me. I really want to keep on to that game and implement as much of the feeling creates for me in my own game. So I got like these guides that help me guide the game in a certain direction.
Okay.
Is there, look at for ideas for how people have taken longer, bigger games and make them, into maybe like a card version or, like a smaller, like a dice rolling version. Is there any insight when people do that in terms of like how you can take some of these bigger, longer games and cutting them shorter? Like, is there anything there perhaps? Have you looked into that at all?
Yeah, I have looked into that. You got like a civilization style card game called Innovation.
Yes.
And it's actually
that's what I was thinking about it.
Yeah, it's actually quite a good game. It still takes some time, but it's not like you're playing for hours and hours and hours. And you still somewhat get that feeling. There's not really a map or something that you're place your dudes on, but still, it feels like a civilization game to me. It's somewhat abstracted because you're still handling cards, and it's a lot of information you have to parse. It's a lot of reading cards. It's a lot of what card is that? You have what card? And that's something I want to avoid. But there are a lot of good examples already on the market, which are a big help for me. Yeah.
Cool.
You're giving me. I want to start doing my game again.
That's great.
Because I've been thinking about it, and I've been trying not thinking about it, but trying to remember how it worked.
Right.
Because it's been half a year since I worked on it, and what were the rules again? And then I realized that I had dice in it. And then I hate my brother, but he told me like, why are there dice in your civilization game? I'm like, no, I want dice. And now that I tried to remember it, I forgot about the dice, and I asked the same question like, why are there dice in my game?
It's often like that, right? You have to.
I'm still gonna put them in there.
Yeah. Okay.
I remember why they are in there.
Suddenly.
That's awesome. For our viewers too, as a quick update, I love the photos you sent of his waffle game.
Well, Giele can talk about that as well, because have you played the real waffle game?
Yeah, yesterday
you did?
My brother made a prototype.
Yeah, it looked amazing. Perhaps you can flash some of those pictures for people, but it looked so good.
Yeah, it really looks amazing. He spent so much time cutting those tokens, because they even like have that jagged edge sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he did it all with scissors or a knife. And there are multiple tokens. It's amazing what he did.
But how did it play?
Well,
That's more important.
For me, it was fun, and the team really shines through. I mean, it's really a big plus to have a waffle instead of a farm for me, personally.
Yeah.
It's much more interesting. I really had to feel like at the end of the game, I made my waffle. It's really looking tasty.
Edible components, that's all I'm saying.
See? And he also he made some changes. He implemented the card draw instead of the tokens as a supply in the center of the playing area, which is also a nice addition because you know what's coming. Like there's a set offer. It's just the arrangement of resources you choose from is different. Like you always choose 3, which are adjacent to each other. Well, now you know what's coming. Like if you want cream, you're sure that there will be cream. And that wasn't.
That will be the title. Of the episode.
Yes.
And how's the interaction between the players? How many players did you play it? And
we played with 3. There's actually not really that much interaction. There were some turns like when the other players said like, "Oh no, Giele, I wanted that," because I got first turn and I got to choose something they want. But that's pretty much it. There's always other options available. You're not interacting with other people's waffles, which was a hint we gave him.
That was the main feedback of that playtest, I suppose.
I'd love to ruin other people's waffles. That would be super cool.
Who doesn't?
Yeah.
So, but it played good. Yeah, it was nice, and the theme is really a big thing for him, I think.
The more we talk about stuff, it does get me excited to kind of like, okay, I need to carve time and like go back and start thinking about this, because you have you have an amazing support system, and vice versa here. Of you and your brother, like it's like amazing to see that, and I'm noticing it here too. Like the Roxley designers and things like that, like they have a really nice core, strong group. They meet regularly. So these are really great things.
Yeah, if I hadn't had Jerome and Maxime, I wouldn't be designing probably. It was them that's like, oh, people actually make these things. That made me realize.
And we're also always ready to listen to each other's ideas, and I think that's the most important. You can talk to someone that's completely not into games, and they'll stare at you with a blank face. But here we're lucky that we can talk on the same level at some point.
And at the same time. Also, go ahead, George.
Sorry, go ahead. I was just saying, with honesty too, like you're actually blunt about it. Yeah,
that's true. And we have our different styles. In the beginning, I thought like we make similar stuff, but it's right now I see each one of us got a different style, which also is a downfall for us, because co-designing is not going to work, I think, for us.
No, we give feedback, and not always useful, but we're never on the same page about things.
We all
I told that to
Jerome
gonna say,
too. I'm gonna design that mini game for you in your game. It's like, no, it's not gonna work.
Yeah, when we started this, I told Jerome the same thing. I'm like, all my game ideas, I don't think you'll even care about. They're so not your style.
Yeah.
No, but they will give me ideas, and I will run away with yours.
Yeah, there you go. Nice.
I have one last question for Giele. Tell me the idea of the mist or smoke kind of level game that you wanted to make. Short explanation, because I think the theme will speak to George.
How do I introduce this? So I had this idea. It's all again based on a computer game, a flash game online. I had this idea that often board games are really 2D. You got the board and you play on the board. But I wanted to recreate a game that grows like into height as well. So you're actually building the world, and the world is flooding. Terraforming the world, flooding, and you either play as players that want to survive on the world, or you play as nature or whatever else that rises, that make the water rise. And it's actually a tile placement game that you're placing not only in a what do you call it? You're horizontal. You also play in the height, so you're stacking tiles on top of each other. And it's actually a game of keeping the high ground, but it's still an idea.
Because it's already a different idea than what I thought it was.
There's several versions of it.
There's so many versions. Yeah. I really like that concept as well, and I've often looked for games that take it. Your idea is interesting because it sounds like you're building the height. It doesn't come already there. The games I have seen made already have like 3 or 4 levels, and you play within those. And it's kind of like a 3D tic-tac-toe in some aspects, where you kind of look from above to aim down or aim up. Or I think there was a Star Wars game with multiple levels.
Queen's Gambit or something.
I think so.
But it's out of print. But it made me think about Santorini and Taluga or something.
And actually, I recently saw a post on Facebook about someone working on a on a similar game, in which you keep the stacks of the tiles in the box, and each game you play, you start excavating those tiles, and then the game at a certain moment ends, and you just like fill the box back up again. And next game you start with that setup exactly. So each game is a sort of it's not really a legacy building game, but each game is different because you start playing from where you ended the previous game, and it's really
interesting.
Pretty nice. I think it's called Stack Worlds. I'm not really sure, but it made me think about my idea.
Neat. I also have, but I've never tried it. The climbers. I don't know if that has anything
All
similar to
right.
that. I know that you keep like there's little ladders and you have to keep
Yeah.
moving up. When you said it's about like keeping the height or being at the top, that kind
Hmm.
of what made me. And it's the big blocks that are heavy,
Yeah.
and you just like kind of stack them.
Yeah. And I really
But
find those games interesting. Like when
yeah,
they really appeal to me that there's something in front of you that's not really
yeah,
2D. I also played
yeah.
like a few months ago a game that was more like a dexterity game in which you place ladders and meeples
Oh yeah,
onto it.
to the moon, I think,
Yeah, to the moon.
something.
Yeah, and
Neat.
I
Yeah,
it just it's such an atypical game for me, and I really
yeah,
liked it actually, even
yeah.
though it was a dexterity game more.
It also looks good on the table.
Yeah,
And you know, like that Dark Tower classic
yeah,
game.
sure.
I actually one of my designs was because I'm in love with the Neverending Story, and I know it's one of those hard licenses to get in any form. Like I know they've tried to make video games with it, but one of my designs had like a combination of it was you had the Fantasia Tower, Ivory Tower from the movie in the middle, but it was actually 3D sculpt kind of like the tower, and it had lights and anyway, really ambitious design. But the board around it was like all the different areas of Fantasia, and in the movie, the Nothing takes over, and it's
Starts to
kind of like a
crumble.
combination of Atlantis, the
Broke my
game,
heart.
where like. I know, right? But you know how in Atlantis you lose the board, and you have to force people to keep coming more closer and closer to, and in this case the tower. So that was kind of based on that. But it was all about like how is it going to look on the table?
Yeah, yeah. But that can be a source of inspiration, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
that's really cool.
to end, I can say that Fujikoro is also about the lava crawling and making everyone go back to the center.
And it
But,
looks nice.
Yeah,
And it looks nice.
it looks really nice.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for hiding my procrastination on my own designs.
Thanks for having me, George.
I
Yeah,
hope
thanks
next
for.
time I'll have something to show. But yeah, thanks for talking about your Civilization game design. And if you make progress and if we can play it, love to hear from it. Yeah.
Love to have you come again, and and thanks for the insights. I'm gonna start making a list of things that I don't want my games to be.
Like such lists.
And I found my Neverending Story little drawings.
Oh, that's awesome.
Beautiful. I'm so happy I'm still recording.
Oh yeah, yeah. I was like, yeah, all the pieces are gonna start getting destroyed, and then I had a list of like tokens you have to have in that game, like the Oracle. I mean, come on, those statues were amazing. Obviously, you'll have like Rockbiter. The first player token was gonna be the book, the Neverending Story book, which I have a replica upstairs that I had made. I'm a little obsessed.
George, I
But-
feel like you should be the next guest.
You know, I like the cool part. You know what it was? Like I really fell in love with the idea of the game. And I in my video game I was making about dreams had that, like the whether you don't know if you're dreaming or you're in real life. The players are actually all reading a copy of the Neverending Story book. That like the player board is actually the book, and then you have things in there that you do, and then you're affecting things in Fantasia. So I thought that was really cool, and there was like that was like an idea of like how do we affect a Fantasia and all these different characters and things and fight the Nothing, but we're doing it from the real world,
Right.
and I thought that was
because
really
That's
neat.
interesting.
in the movie, he did stuff in the real world, and he would then go back and open the book, and stuff had happened while he was away, something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and it's from especially the moment where he names the
princess.
queen, right? The princess, yeah. That he really affects Fantasia or whatever. Anyway, so I thought that was a key, and I need idea to, yeah. Anyway, I